Do you remember the day you stopped showing up in your own life? It didn't happen with a scream, but with a breath too small to notice. A gaze lost outside the window, your hand resting on a coffee mug, the coffee growing cold. The pain no longer burned like it once did, but it didn't speak either. You tried to fill it with words, with promises, with other people's noise. Everything dissolved like smoke. There was only one place nothing could reach: yourself. And there, on the cold floor of your own absence, something strange stirred. Perhaps it wasn't a hole to be patched, but an empty room to sit in. Perhaps healing wasn't about smothering the echo, but listening to it. Today I invite you to walk with me into that room, where each silence holds the shape of a strength you haven't yet awakened. He moved through the streets as if flipping through a book he had read too many times. Nothing surprised him. Faces passed like dry leaves caught in the wind. In his pocket he carried a strip of faded fabric. No one knew why. It was what remained from a coat he wore one distant winter, when something inside him quietly broke. The fabric didn't keep him warm, but it reminded him the pain once had shape. Some days he thought of throwing it away. Other days, it felt like the only anchor keeping him from drifting away completely. Yet the fabric was so light it somehow weighed more than he did. Each touch was an invitation to remember and to forget at the same time. In the soft friction of cloth against skin, absence found its body, and presence slipped quietly away. One colorless afternoon he stepped into an antique shop to escape the rain. The air smelled of old wood and forgotten stories. Between stopped clocks and tarnished mirrors, his eyes landed on a small wooden box, locked with a key that was nowhere to be found. The shopkeeper said no one knew what was inside, maybe nothing. He didn't buy it. He simply stood there, staring at that box as if it were a mirror. It was strange how an object could hold the same silence that lived in his chest. For a moment he thought the box was breathing with him, inhaling and exhaling absence. He touched it lightly, and the cold wood replied with a subtle shiver. There was no revelation, just a quiet recognition. Two empty spaces greeting each other. When he left the shop, the rain had stopped, but the image of that box stayed heavy in his mind. That night, he lay down with the box still haunting his thoughts. The faded cloth in his pocket felt rougher, as if trying to get his attention. He turned in bed, searching for a position where the body could forget to exist. Sleep didn't come. Only one thought kept knocking. If he opened that box, what would he find? Maybe it would be like looking into himself and seeing nothing, or worse, seeing everything. The silence in the room was so dense it could almost be touched. Outside, a dog barked, the sound disappearing too quickly, leaving him alone with the echo. The old pain was there, unmoving, not like an open wound, but like an object left in the back of a drawer. Why did he keep it? The question brought no answers, only a sharper emptiness, as if the air were slowly stepping away from his body. At sunrise, he returned to the shop. He said nothing when he entered, only walked to the shelf where the box was waiting. He held it with both hands. This time he didn't try to imagine what was inside. He realized the weight didn't come from the wood, but from the empty space within. It was the same weight he felt in his own chest, and suddenly, he understood. He didn't need to open it to know. The absence was not an enemy. It was a frame. It gave shape to what might still come. Without a word, he set the box back where it belonged, but something in him had shifted. The fabric in his pocket felt lighter. As he stepped outside, sunlight danced in the puddles left by last night's rain. And there, reflected in the unstable surface, he saw himself whole, not because he was complete, but because he finally fit inside his own silence. In the days that followed, he didn't return to the shop. He didn't need to. The box now walked with him, invisible, occupying a quiet corner of his mind. The fabric still lived in his pocket, but it was no longer an anchor. It was a keepsake. He could touch it without falling into the old void. Instead, each touch was like resting a hand on a closed door and accepting that not all doors need to be opened. He began noticing small signs of presence. The sound of a spoon against a cup, the smell of wet soil, the brief warmth of sunlight passing through a window. Nothing shouted, nothing demanded, The strength that rose in him was quiet, almost invisible to others but steady enough to hold him. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't try to step away from himself. The absence was still there, but now it knew its own name. Old pain doesn't need to disappear for you to live. It can be the silent outline of your strength. What once felt like a weight pulling you away can become the space where you sit whole. Presence is not made only of joy or fullness, it is also born from what has remained quiet. When you accept this, absence stops being a hole and becomes a place where you can breathe. Carry this phrase as your seal. I inhabit my emptiness, and it sustains me. Sealing ritual. Write this phrase by hand on a small piece of paper. Fold it 3 times as if closing a door with care. Place it somewhere it can remain undisturbed, not to be read every day, but to be there when you need to remember. If this path speaks to you, walk with us. The next story waits exactly where silence meets the light.